everybody, I'm Jen,
And I'm Tammy.
and they call us Woo. Welcome back, everybody. Today we get to talk about another exciting topic, one that we have brought up several times, but we never jumped into. We might have just a little bit, just a little. Today we're going to be talking about generational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many different aspects of this that I'm kind of excited to talk about it because there's the scientific aspect and there's also the energetic aspect and the emotional components that are wrapped up in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
So today, I know I would love to talk about all those things. I'm sure Tammy wants to talk about all those things. So, Tammy, where would you like to start today?
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting because it's come up more than once in conversation recently, which is why I thought might be kind of fun for us to talk about. I mean, we came up with the idea long ago, but I don't know. Sometimes the subjects just happen when they need to happen. But people have been talking about working through their generational trauma. And in the context I've talked about it a lot lately has been more on the energetic side of people working through things that they believe were. I've heard people have it in different contexts. Some people use it in the terms of like, I'm working through things in my own past life. Some people talk past lives. Some people talk about it in the sense of like things that have happened through their family history that have
Mm-hmm.
continued to show up in generations after that, in people and other people in those generations. Um, so I just think it's an interesting subject because I think there's a lot of different ways that you can look at it from a very high level perspective. I mean, our souls choose the human timeline, human bloodline that we want to be in for many different reasons, which is fascinating to me because there's just so many different layers of things that can be involved in that. But
Yeah.
we look at things like certain cultures and ethnicities and stuff too that have a continued experience through many generations of turmoil, of
Yeah.
many different types of affliction, of being persecuted, like all these different things
Yeah.
that you can't help but step back and go, you know, there's something to that. Like it's not just each person doing their own thing. Like there's something to the fact that this thing goes back many generations and
Yeah.
it keeps on happening. And I think it's fascinating that um, on a soul level, we can choose what we want out of, you know, our lives, our human lives and the contracts we have and stuff like that. And sometimes we're choosing things specifically because we want a specific experience. And that's fascinating to me to
Yeah.
think that there is, yeah, there's a difference there. And having been like done some past life regression stuff and stuff like that, it's interesting even when you're talking about, like, I have told some people about the different lives I went into and they asked, you know, do you have that in your DNA? Like, if you've done a DNA test and you have those ethnicities in your DNA, and I do, but I also think that's fascinating too because it doesn't necessarily, like, it can be in your history without being in your DNA, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. It's just this
Yeah.
fascinating onion.
You just made me think of, so I have always told people that I was a cat in a past life, which I know I was. I had to have been. But this is a weird generational thing. Like in my past life, I was a cat. And now, if you put something in front of me, something dangly in front of me, I immediately, like people hang things from their mirrors in their car. I have a really hard time because I will sit and bat at it, bat at it, bat at it, bat at it. And I decided that it's a generational thing from my past life. Like it's a carryover from there. Um, Kind of a silly thing, But it's kind of the same as what happens with things that have happened in our own past lives,
Mm-hmm.
is sometimes there's just a little bit of carryover that comes forward and it's imprinted into your energetic makeup so that it creates these patterns that you do, these things that you go
Mm-hmm.
back to comfort or because they feel comfortable to you. And um generational trauma has, like I said at the beginning, so many different components. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because it's a very human piece of it, is that when you are an egg, before you are born, when you're an egg in your mom's womb, you are actually an egg in your mom's womb while she is in her mom's womb. So you're actually part of the cellular process and the biological process that's happening within your grandmother's womb well before you're actually born. So part of generational trauma is the energetic carryover that happens from your grandmother and then your mother and then yourself. Because if you're there during that whole process in the womb of your grandmother, any trauma that she's been through, so if your grandmother lived through the Depression,
Mm-hmm.
any of the wars that we've had, like, that is being imprinted cellularly into your physical vessel, into your egg before you're born. And then your mom carries you. And again, you're getting more of that imprinted energy. You're getting more of that cellular imprint from any traumas that your mom's experiencing as well. So, like, there's actually studies. I went and looked up studies because I find this fascinating, even
Mm-hmm.
from an energetic standpoint. I've worked with this with clients in the past, but from like the cellular biological standpoint, it's fascinating to look at the studies that they actually have and what they're starting to look at. And one of the things that they were looking at is if it is a block in the energetic signals that happen, like when you have stress. So if your grandmother had stress because she was in war times and she was pregnant with your mom, you're there as well. That stress could be blocking some of those signals in her system so that there's certain processes within you and certain like mitochondrial stimulus that does not happen so that you can form appropriately to deal with those types of stress. So you were talking about different countries and different places that continue the patterns of war and continue the patterns of all of these traumatic things. Part of that could be because it's actually imprinted into people at a cellular level that they can't deal with certain stressors. So they're going to go back to that same pattern of doing because that's what's imprinted into them. So, like, even beyond the energetic stuff of it, which I love, that piece of it is so fascinating to me to
Mm-hmm.
recognize that your body just might not be formed enough to deal with those stressors again, or those, like, even if it's something super joyful, like your body is still going to respond in the same manner as it was taught at a cellular level, at a DNA level, to respond to it. So, can you tell I'm a little bit excited about this? Because I'm like, yay,
It is.
studies.
It is really interesting though that they're doing studies um around that, right? Because people don't always think about how far back just in our physical bodies that can go.
Mhm.
And it does tie all back into the soul piece of it too, right? Because we have all of these, contracts that we have, and sometimes these contracts are not finished. So we might be choosing this particular biological line because there's things that we want to experience in that
Yeah.
biological line that are going to tie into those contracts that we have. Or it's kind of fascinating, sometimes people might find that they have had different lives in similar situations, um and it is so tied in to the physical genetic piece of it too. And I mean, of
Mhm.
course, we also see just in our current lives, like a lot of us have come to be more open and understanding to the trauma that we experience in this life. But you know, you talk to your relatives and stuff like that, and it's always pretty fascinating how similar experiences can be if they're willing to be open to you about that kind of thing, or you find out about your parents or their parents
Yep.
or whatever the case may be, and how similar the experiences are. So even if you're not thinking of it in the soul piece of it, there's so
Mhm.
much evidence, like you said, that physically, genetically, we can continue to adapt, you know, before we're
Mhm.
even born.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense even on just the biological piece of it, right? Because everything adapts to survive in the best way that it can.
True.
So whatever we're used to, we're gonna adapt to that, and we can always expand. But it's just interesting that there's so many different ways to look at it, but it all ties into kind of a similar thing.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating to me to look at my biological family history and understand that a bit more, which I've been very compelled to do even more so. And I also think it's really interesting how we all tend to be really fascinated with our own genetics and our own family history. Like, we all want to know where we came from. We all want to know what who was in our timeline. We all love family trees. We all love all that. And now that we have access to these DNA tests and stuff like that, we can figure out exactly what ethnicities are in our history if we choose to. And whether it be passed down verbally, like your family's just like, oh, you're from so and so place, or you actually do these tests, I feel like you're always really connected to one ethnicity that you're just fascinated by. And there's got to be a
Yeah.
reason for that, right? Like, there's always some type of connection. And I remember being really interested and kind of intrigued when, for myself, my Native American heritage has always been super fascinating to me, and it's always the one that I resonated with the most and I wanted to know the most information about. And then when I did the regressions, going into a specific memory
Mhm.
where the bigger picture totally made sense from a previous life, I'm like, oh. And now I've become a lot more fascinated with my physical, like, genetic history and stuff too. And trying to kind of find more information about that through the family tree,
Yeah.
because it's just interesting to put all these little puzzle pieces together about who
Yeah.
you are and understand some more of why you operate the way that you do. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, we're all
I,
fascinated by that.
yeah. Well, and then some of us are scared to look at it. So I have several people that I know that have done those DNA tests, and they've found out all kinds of things that their family did not want anybody to find out.
Yeah, they do that too,
But
I've heard.
uh-huh. So then there's a whole different type of trauma that comes into play. But
Yeah.
but it is it's kind of fun to see. I've had several of my clients who would bring in their DNA tests and like um show me their heritage and where all the different pieces of them came from, and they're like, I'm 20% this and I'm 30% this, and people get super excited about it. But then I've seen people who their families told them, oh, you're 50% Italian and you're 10% in this, and then they go and they take the test and it says none of that.
No.
Like, completely different. And some of the places have said, until we have a high enough percentage of people who've taken these DNA tests, we can't be 100% accurate as far as where everybody's coming from, because they don't have the base to tell you, oh, well, you came from this specific part of Europe, or you came from this specific part of a different place. So until they have a high enough pool, those numbers are going to keep changing. So I have several people that I knew that went and had these DNA tests done. And then 5 years later, they went and had them done again. And they were very different. They were very different. And
it
the
is
logical
interesting how
thing.
much it like it's gotten a lot better. But people who did it in the early stages, there's been a lot of changes. The place I've done mine, and the place I did it through, they'll send you updates if they get more specific information or
Okay.
But there's some of it that they can get so specific that they can get down to like the town and precisely where some of your ancestors are from. It's really fascinating. But then you also take into consideration too that my history is not necessarily the same as my sister's. You take different genetics from each of your parents. So, you know, were your grandparents and stuff completely wrong when they said different things? Maybe not. But it is really interesting how some of the things might show up for me that wouldn't necessarily show up for.
See, and that's the part that I think makes people really nervous about it in families, because then it makes people think, what are they not telling me?
Well, if we had the exact same DNA as our sibling, we would be a twin, and then like no one would be able to tell. Like, there's
that is a fair point. That's a fair point.
There is no identical DNA unless you're an identical twin.
Happens like how are we that much different? I haven't had mine done. I have not had mine done, but maybe I'll consider it.
It is interesting. And I do want to acknowledge too, I appreciate that you brought this up. I do want to acknowledge too that I am in a position where I can be excited about it, where there certainly is family history that has much more trauma to it, where there's people who might be afraid. Like I can certainly understand, you know, members of the Black community or some others who might not want to necessarily know some of the things in their history. But regardless of if you physically take a test and you physically see it or whatever, you are living out things that are part of your history all the time, you know? And there is many ways to acknowledge and understand and deal with that trauma. I mean, that is something that therapists talk about. Like therapists talk a lot about things that have been passed through generations, especially in the terms of some of the uglier things like abuse and stuff like that. There's definitely support out there for that. But there's also, if that's not a place that you are or you want to be, there's also a lot of energetic and spiritual and alternative methods that you can use to try to address that. Like for me, hypnosis was a big thing because there was trauma in those memories that came up that I was able to look at and address from a different perspective and be able to kind of see what I needed to see from that so I could start to heal from it. And that's really what I think is the key, right? Is you want to be able to look at it from a place of you're not judging what happened because you can't change what happened. It happened already. You're not judging that. You're not taking the responsibility on yourself for what happened. You're not feeling like you need to take that experience away from anyone. You're not judging the discomfort around it. You're just observing it and trying to find a way to heal and get to a place where you can have that as part of your identity without feeling all of the things that feel really harmful. You know, if that makes sense. I've certainly observed it in, well, a lot of people I know, but I've spoken in the past about some of the stuff that my husband has experienced, and it is interesting from an outside perspective, or to have the privilege is not the right word, but to have the viewpoint of looking from an outside perspective as someone unravels all of those pieces, because I can look at it from a place of not judging it the same way because it's not as personal to me. But these previous generations, there's something that we are taking with us because we are wanting an experience from it. And whatever that experience is, if we can find any way, whether they be traditional methods of therapy, whatever it may be, if we can find any way to be able to be like a conscious observer and try not to feel like we are just destined to keep on experiencing these same things. You know what I mean? Like, this is just the way it is forever. I'm always going to be a victim of these circumstances. If we can find a way to try to observe it without having those feelings, with support from however we need to get support, then you can start to feel like you're able to see different elements of it and start to understand it more. Because sometimes it's understanding that I feel like makes a difference in how much you continue to carry with you.
Yeah.
Or whether or not you're bringing forth elements like, and this is, everyone who's listening is going to come from a different place. So this isn't coming from a place of being unloving or callous, but I know when my husband and I communicate about some of the things he's been through, sometimes we do acknowledge that some of the things that he's been through and his ability to move through them also had another side of the coin where they gave him a gift of either empathy in a way that people who haven't been through that experience would not be able to have. So being able to connect with people and understand things that you don't even have to say out loud. Being able to offer the type of love that only experience can sometimes give you can sometimes be something that comes from moving through it and having that healing. And then being able to understand that when you are moving through these experiences, you're also helping to heal those previous generations and those moving forward, because at a soul level we can still continue to be connected, and sometimes we can make each other a little stuck. Not that it's not something that we need to judge, but it's more just like when we release things, we cause this beautiful ripple. When we finish whatever we wanted to finish in that particular moment, we cause this beautiful ripple that doesn't just affect us, it affects everyone else around us in this life and through generations. And it's like a beautiful way to look at what would otherwise be a very tough situation, right? Because everybody's at a different place dealing with that.
Well, and for me, I've walked through a lot of the past life stuff. I've also looked at the generational trauma that's been passed down through my family lines, like my physical family lines here. And one of the things that I've recognized is that when I take the time to fully acknowledge the patterns that I'm seeing, because most of the things are coming in the form of a pattern. And it's usually not just one thing that we're like, oh my gosh, this one thing in my life is, there's patterns. There's times that things are continually occurring. We're continually making the same choices. We're continually doing similar things to get that same outcome. And when I start to recognize that I'm doing those things, where I'm continuing and perpetuating those patterns, taking the time to sit down and acknowledge, okay, this is the pattern that I'm seeing. This is the thing that I keep doing. And it's like you said, it's not a judgment thing. It's just saying, oh, that thing, I always do that. Let's change that. I look at that, I acknowledge that, I journal about that. Like, where is this affecting me in my life? Is this something that I can look at objectively and I can acknowledge that it's either hurting me or it's helping me? Because some of the patterns that we have are really helping us in this moment. They're helping us move forward, or they're helping us to stay stuck and safe. Like, things that we might perceive as bad, they also have something good that it's doing for us. A lot of the time when we are doing these things to protect ourselves, it's so that we can stay small and safe and protect ourselves. Um, so I'll do like acknowledgement work and then I'll journal on it to see, okay, am I stuck? Is this a good thing? Is this something that I'm perceiving as a bad thing? And then I make a choice how I want to move forward. Okay,
Mhm.
am I okay with staying in this? Am I okay with holding this pattern for a while? Do I feel like it's serving me to stay in this pattern? And this is all very intentional work. It's not me just willy-nilly being like, "Oh yeah, I don't like that pattern anymore. I'm going to move on. I'm going to do something else." It's intentional. Like you
Yeah.
need to sit with it. You need to acknowledge the pieces that you're receiving from it,
Mhm.
and then you can move forward.
And you have to
Um
sit in the discomfort, which is hard
yes.
because that is arguably the hardest part of the work. But I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of times when you've dealt with generational trauma, um, as to be fair, we all have some to larger extents, but we
Yes.
all have some. Um, it's like you get to this point where you have to decide if it's more uncomfortable to continue to do the same thing
Mhm.
or to sit with it for a minute and allow yourself to feel all the icky, you
Yeah.
know, and then figure out if there is any other way to look at it and
Mhm.
take these little baby steps. Because
Yeah.
certainly some of these experiences are going to be much harder. And like you said, we've created sometimes some of these circumstances to keep ourselves safe because we're
Mhm.
not ready for that yet, which is also
Yes.
okay. But if you're sitting with it with the intention of offering even just the littlest bit of love to yourself, it it's when you start to be able to kind of acknowledge like, okay, what do I want right now?
Mhm.
Am I ready for this? If I'm not, that's okay. But I checked in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I am ready for it, like this little piece of love, even if you have a hard time feeling that love for yourself, it could be this littlest bit of love towards the others in your life who have been affected. It could be this littlest bit of love towards the others in your past that have been affected that starts to become something that feels more personal as you move through
Mhm.
it. Because I know certainly sometimes it's hard to give yourself that type of love if that's not your norm.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think for a lot of people there's this point of like, which discomfort is more uncomfortable
Mhm.
for me right now?
And if you're not at a point, because I know there have been a lot of times that I'm like, I don't love anything about this situation. I'm just frickin' tired of it. Like
Yes.
I want nothing to do with this anymore. I hate every minute of this. And in that moment, I cannot muster up a loving thought about anything. And that is part of the process
Right.
sometimes. But where the next piece comes in, the part of moving forward is finding just the smallest anything, the smallest little step that you can move forward.
Mhm.
If that small step is, I'm acknowledging that I hate this and I
Yeah.
don't want to be here anymore,
Mhm.
that's a step.
It is.
And
You're
a
right.
lot of people don't acknowledge that that is a step.
Yep.
Once you finally recognize where you're at, you can start taking little steps to move forward
Yep.
and shift yourself back out of that pattern.
Mhm.
Because patterns are usually, when we start setting them, we're choosing that for a reason. And we choose to keep going in that direction.
Mhm.
It's always a choice, whether we recognize it consciously or not. It's a
Mhm.
choice that we're making. So when you choose differently and choose to take a different step, you can start to heal.
Yeah.
And it takes a really freaking long time sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't need to happen right this second as much as we would
No.
like it to.
And that's a part of like going back into that is a loving act towards yourself.
Mhm.
It might not seem like it in the moment, but just
Mhm.
acknowledging, like you said, acknowledging the situation is a step and it is an act of love towards yourself rather
Yes.
than being in a space where you can't even get to that point where you realize it's a thing that is making you uncomfortable. And I don't even know if it's possible to reach out for the support you need when you're not ready to acknowledge that it's a thing that's happening either. It's and in those moments it's really easy to look externally that things are happening to you, and certainly that it absolutely feels that way sometimes. And the more you have had happen to you, especially when we see things that happen to, like children and stuff, things that you're just like, oh, I mean, they only had so much understanding of this situation. But there is a lot of love in the moment where you can acknowledge that I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want, like you said, I don't want any part of this. Or even just acknowledging, like, yeah, this thing happened to me and it wasn't right.
Yeah.
And then you can start to feel like you can maybe start to move in the direction. But again, everybody's going to go at their own pace. There's so many different layers, like we're saying, to this. And the truth behind all of it is there is always loving support on that soul level for you. And there's always things and choices that you're making that you might not understand at all how it would be helpful for you, but you're still making choices that ultimately are going to be helpful for you. And you are doing better than you think. Yeah. All the time. You are doing better than you think, even if you can't fully see it at the moment. But there's, speaking as yourself being a medium your whole life, there's, I'm sure, interesting aspects to that too, where there's a kind of being able to connect with people and people from your own history in a way where you can make the connections of, okay, so I made this choice, and then these guides or these ancestors had this interaction with me where now I understand this a little bit more fully, which is, I'm sure, fascinating, especially as a child when maybe it, like, you didn't even know that you were doing that. You didn't know all the time that all these people were part of this bigger picture all the time.
Sometimes I go back and I'm like, why didn't you just tell me? Why didn't you just tell me back then and save me all the trouble? But I know why I did that. Yeah. But still, it reminds we don't understand until we do.
Yes, exactly. And it reminds me of a conversation I was just having about this understanding I came to, that there was an agreement between myself and someone else in my life that I needed to be triggered in a specific way. And even if it was pretty uncomfortable, the whole situation, I was like, oh, if I would have known about that ahead of time, it wouldn't have been able to happen.
Nope.
And now I see what comes after that, and it makes sense. But like you said, you don't know until you know. But even just the slightest bit of acknowledging and opening, you're doing a good thing. You're doing a good thing for yourself. You're doing a good thing for all of those previous generations. And if you have that feeling like this is not all your junk, you're right.
Yeah.
But there's two truths to that, right? Yeah, it's not all of your junk, but also you do have some control over that and how the junk continues.
Yeah.
How you opt for it to happen after this point.
Yeah. There's one thing that I always end with when I'm doing any type of generational trauma work, intergenerational trauma or transgenerational trauma, whatever you want to call it. People call it all different things. When I get to a certain point, when I know I've acknowledged and I know I'm starting to work through it, and I get to this point where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I've been working on this for a real long time and I'm just really tired of it. I always throw in one more step for myself where it's like I look at I'm somebody who I will put other people before me a lot of the time because I want to help people. I really want to help people. And so
Mhm.
sometimes if I'm stuck, I use that to my advantage because I know that's a pattern of mine. So I'm like, I can use this to my advantage. And I will ask myself, if I decide to choose differently today, how can this impact people who come behind me? How will
Mm.
this impact the generations behind me? If I don't carry this pattern anymore, is it going to help more people? And that, for me, that's a huge nudge for me. That won't work for everybody. Some people will be like, it's not my job to take care of everybody else. And that's fine, because sometimes I feel that way too. Sometimes I'm like sassy pants and I'm like, nope, you deal with your stuff. I got my own stuff to do right here. But there are some days that I really just need that little nudge to say, hey, you can really make a difference
Mhm.
if you decide to continue doing the work that you started and you decide to continue looking at this trauma from a different perspective and choose differently for your next step. Choose a different building block, choose a different path. Because if I do this work today, somebody else doesn't have to do it tomorrow.
Yeah. That's a really good point though, because I do feel like a lot of times people who have had a lot of trauma can sometimes feel very disconnected from themselves and their own feeling or feel unworthy of love or support. So sometimes it might be easier to think about
Mhm.
it that way
Yeah.
of what is this doing for the people coming after me. And the more you work with that, the more it can start to turn into putting yourself in the equation, even if it doesn't feel like you should be in that equation at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really that makes a lot of sense, honestly.
Because
Because
you
sometimes
actually
I do
do
feel
get
like
something out of it.
you do, and sometimes
Yeah.
I do feel like when you're like, "Oh, this is not my junk," you're kind of coming from a place where you've already been able to acknowledge that. Where in the beginning, you can't always acknowledge that if you don't feel worthy of the support.
Exactly. Exactly.
And there is a lot of support. It can come in even just the form of if we really think about those moments in our life where someone, a stranger, something we read, something on TV, whatever, says just that thing that you're like, oh, yep, I needed that today. That is
Mhm.
support. You were supposed to see that. You were supposed to hear that. Someone was
Yeah.
guided to give you that information. And that's just how loved you are
Mhm.
ultimately.
Yeah.
Even if it feels like all of this stuff is just piled on top of you. Yeah, it's a thing. Generational trauma is a thing. But you are so loved in
Mhm.
a way that you might not always even feel worthy of, but it's still true.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tammy, I'm gonna end up looking at a bunch of my stuff after this. I'm sure of
Yeah,
it.
there was some
My
conversation
cat life.
pieces in there too where I was like, oh, yeah, good point.
Yep. My cat life. I'm gonna have to go and change out the dangly thing in my car. My inner cat is wanting to come out and deal with that.
Well, don't sit in my car anytime soon. The little thing dangling from my rearview mirror has a bell on it, so that would just be like
That's
the
actually so my
ultimate
fiance.
cat toy.
Oh, my fiance has a bell in his car, and his kids. Sometimes I get in the car and I tend to I'll just paw at it a little bit. And there was one day I did that, and his daughter goes, "I haven't heard you do that in a while." And it didn't even occur to me that they paid any attention to me dinging the bell in the car because half the time I don't notice I do it. Sometimes I do it because the energy needs to be cleared and I'm like, there's too much, ding, 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 ding. Um, but it's something that they recognize
Hmm.
and probably because it shifts the energy, but
Mm-hmm.
Yes, bells are very fun to play with kitty energy in the car.
Yeah, my little nephew who comes over, I have this dish in my house of all these different rocks, and of course he loves all the rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And the rule is he gets to pick one at a time because otherwise I'd never find them again. And once he's done with that one, he can put it back. And the first thing he always picks is the bell. And then he'll run around and play with the bell for a while. And then he'll come back and go, "Can I pick a rock?" Yeah. Like he just does it. He just.
I think you should get a whole bunch of bells and put them all in there and see what happens. It will be like ding, ding, ding.
Yes.
It'll be great. It'll be great.
I agree.
You need extra bells. I will send you some.
Sounds good.
Just for the cause.
Oh, well, this was a really interesting conversation, and I know there's so much more that we could unpack around this, but I'm glad the conversation started. This felt like a good time to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I hope everybody gets a chance to like sit down and really look at their patterns and give themselves space to look at the healing of that, rather than trying to force themselves to do something in a quick manner. Just peacefully give yourself some space. Know that you're loved, know that you're supported. And yeah. Thanks everybody for listening. I hope that you have an amazing week, and we will see you next week. Bye.
If you want more woo, please feel free to check the links in the description. Of course, we love hearing from you, so keep letting us know all of your lovely ideas. Have a beautiful day, our wonderful woo mates.